and berry bushes and so on. So I said it would be really good to invite my really good dear friend. I call him Dr. Phil, or Phil Quinn from Quinn Farms. And everybody knows Quinn Farms over here in the West Island. And so the only thing is I have to tell you, I won't say that I'm jealous, but I'm very envious. He's a great presenter, and I've learned a few things from him too. So this is really important. And also his wife Stephanie, I asked her to come along, that she's involved with the 4-H Club. So Phil is going to do his number. He asked me to be his opening act, so we're going to do some Motown here. There we are. You see? And then after, his wife is going to do some basic introduction to a 4-H Club, what the 4-H Club is involved, and there are things that we do to get involved in it. I went to speak about 2 years ago for a 4-H group at one time. And so without further ado, Mr. Phillip Quinn.
The Quinn Farm, Mom and Dad started back in 1982 from scratch. There was absolutely nothing there but open fields whenever they did buy back in 82. And progressively we just got bigger and bigger and planted. We started out very, very small. There's a question here earlier, how much investment does it take? They started out with $30,000 back in the day and a $500 tractor, and now it's a multi-million-dollar business. It's large. We're cropping about 200 acres. Stephanie's got a beautiful aerial shot that we took this summer, pardon me. 200 acres just northwest of here, across the river and west a little bit on Ile Perrot. Cropping everything from maple syrup in the next couple of weeks. We only do a little bit of syrup. Asparagus will be our first crop. Strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, gooseberries, currants, all kinds of vegetables in the garden. Sweet corn, lots and lots of sweet corn, pumpkins, apples, Christmas trees, lots of squash too. Beautiful squash. Throughout the presentation, guys, if you have any questions, just shout them out right away. And I've got some prizes here. If you participate and you ask me questions, I got stuff for you. And you'll be vying for, look at that, talk about making your vegetables sexy. Isn't that sexy?
Oh, yeah.
Popcorn, Quinn Farm popcorn. Whoever asks the most amazing question gets the popcorn. And we do a lot, very, very special guests to this spring picking strawberries at the farm. Prime Minister came with the cavalry. Oh my goodness, lots and lots of security that day. Humble guy, toured the farm, really, really fun. We do have about 100,000 or so guests, probably a little bit less than that since COVID. We try to cap it a little bit. About 100,000 guests a year come to the farm and experience what we do. From picking to just the store. We've got a beautiful on-farm store. I'm more of the production guy. Stephanie is more of the retail guru. Totally didn't get pictures of the retail. Next one, Steph. Frost protection on the strawberries this spring. Anyone lose any crops this spring for the frost? Late frost during bloom. We lost about 50% of our strawberries. Whatever we did have covered with the irrigation, that's the old sprinklers there that put the water out. We don't irrigate with those sprinklers anymore. We use them exclusively for frost protection. Thank goodness we did have it, but there were a few fields farther out that we couldn't protect. They were just too far from our water source, and we just didn't have a large enough irrigation system for that. But we lit fires as well in the orchard.
It protects them by putting a coat of water?
Yeah. The creation of ice, the energy that is released by the creation of ice will protect it. It's counterintuitive. You'd think it would just kill everything, but if that creation of ice ceases, you're done. The water can't stop until that last little bit of ice is thawed mid-morning usually. So it involves a huge volume of water. Yeah.
How much of your acreage is tiled?
Tiled? All of it.
All of it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's 200 acres of tiled. The last bit was about 100 acres or so. The last tile went in just before Christmas. So Mom and Dad bought the first land 82, 86 on the next one, and then Stephanie and I bought the next farm over, just 3 consecutive farms in 2019. It hadn't been farmed since 1971, so there were big trees there. The soil quality was just amazing, but lots and lots to contend with as far as roots and stones, and lots of work for leveling as well. Ditches needed to be straightened up a little bit and proper grade, but now it's looking really good, and we're rocking and rolling. We got our first strawberries planted on that land last year. We'll see a picture of that coming up real soon. The next one, I think.
This frost damage.
Oh, there's a frost damage. Whenever you're in doubt as to whether or not your flower is dead, there's a dead one and there's a live one, nice and green inside. If you see the flower bud and you're not sure, don't be afraid to grab a jackknife, cut it open. Same thing for apples. If you got small apples formed on a tree and you don't know whether or not it's been affected by the frost, just cut it open. It'll be dark inside if it has been.
Talk about smudge fires.
Yes, the smudge fires in the orchard. We'll grab a bale of straw and cover it with a huge mound of wood chips. The wood chips, they're kind of green and they'll smolder, whereas the straw, it'll burn real quick. So we'll set fire to that bale under the wood chips and it'll smolder like that all night long. The neighbors really don't like it. But it saved our orchard. We had 30, 35 fires spread out through the orchard. All you want to do is to slowly move the air that is there. If it's stagnant, that's when it gets cold and it just dies. Whereas the upper atmosphere air is a little bit warmer. If you're able to just change the air or keep the water to it, that's what saves your crop. We were able to save all of the orchard. Some varieties were far more sensitive to the frost, like Royal Gala, Ambrosia, and the old Golden Russet. They all had a band. There's like a belt around them. They were affected by the frost. Next one. Varieties, we'll see variety charts coming up real soon. This one here is my new favorite variety for strawberries. Delicious, huge. This is after a real bad rain, so we got dirt on them. But to keep the dirt off of them, pardon me, mulching is coming up later. I'll delve back into that. The planting on the left here, our strawberry planter. I think we got a better picture coming up. Cultivating, you can hardly tell, you can't tell in this picture, but we got little baby strawberry plants and we're going over that with a comb. It's a tine weeder. It's 16 feet wide and it's got hundreds and hundreds of steel tines that just rip up the little plantules that are weeds. And strawberry planter coming up, there we go. 2-row planter. This is a Holland machine. It's got little fingers that will grab the plant and just bring it into the ground, into a trench that's been opened up by the foot of the planter. And there we go, the mulching. Super important. You can use straw. That's why they're called strawberries. We'll mulch them with a straw in the fall to protect them for the winter, but also to keep the splash off of them for the next season. We'll use lots and lots of compost. Poor Alex has a lot of bureaucracy to contend with there at the farm he's at. We're quite lucky. We can get away with doing 30,000 ton of compost every year. Pff, no problem at all. Environment Quebec comes in and looks at how we do it, and they're happy. Let's go. So we use about half straw, half mulch. We'll do a mix of leaves and wood chips as well for a mulch mixed with our straw, and we'll put that on with our manure spreaders. Just drive over 2 rows at a time and put it on real quick. Either our own or right local. There's about 1,500, 2,000 acres in Il Perrot that is farmed, and whoever's growing grain, we got dibs on that straw. We'll use corn stubble as well. Sometimes if there's no one growing grain on the island, we'll use corn stubble. That's one thing we can start using our own sweet corn stubble. Seeing how we're doing the cover crops. We'll see later in our sweet corn, cover crops are really, really saving our backside as far as the ecosystem in the soil. Really, really, really important. If you're not doing it, you really should. Not only compost, but cover crops as well to keep that biodiversity alive. Storage, super important if you're doing berries. Keep them cold. You pick them, fridge them, pick them, fridge them right away. Humidity?
Yeah, you gotta keep the moisture level high too.
In the fridge, yes, for sure. If you got a conventional fridge with the evaporators up top and the fans, and you got a defrost system in there, you're sucking moisture out of that room. Very important as well to keep the humidity level high, but not too high. You got to watch for gray mold as well. One thing we're doing, we'll see the irrigation coming up real soon as well. The overhead irrigation I mentioned we only use for frost protection now. The reason being we don't want to wet the foliage of those plants to keep the gray mold problem lower. We, at planting, sorry, we'll go back. If you look on the top side of the tractor, there's 2 spools there with drip lines, drip tape. Those go in to the trench and it's buried with the roots of the plant. And as soon as the plant's less than an hour after planting, we'll turn that water on, boom, they got water right where they need it. We'll use a whole lot less water, and it's put right where they need, where it needs to be, and we're keeping the foliage dry, pardon me.
How long does the tubing last under ground?
Depending on the gauge you choose, there's 8 mil that is paper thin and tears so quickly, we don't use that anymore. We put 10 mil in, and it's good. If you get it deep enough, it'll be good 5 years. Yeah. And the Christmas trees where we're not burying it, we'll use 15 mil, and it's good for, oh my goodness, it's good forever. We put some in 20 years ago, and it's still there. Narrated by our son.
Tony and Sam on the water wheel. Basically what it will do.
Oh, sorry.
That's our son Alex narrating there.
I'm just trying to make it louder.
If you want to
There we go.
turn the sound off, I can narrate.
No, I think.
Is this tank here is full of water. Open that valve there. This here. Goes down the hose into those wheels there. Drop a little bit of water in between.
It's called a water wheel for a reason. Those wheels are full of water, and every time one of those teeth pierces the plastic, it drops a little bit of water.
We planted some hot peppers.
Hot peppers.
And over here we got some ground cherries.
Ground cherries, tomatillos.
Aujourd'hui, on a 100 bidonniers sur la water wheel.
He's just saying it all again in French here. We can skip
Aujourd'hui,
it.
on plante des tomates. Il y a aussi des zucchini. So today we have Tony and Sam.
So that the plastic you saw there is a biodegradable plastic, corn-based. It'll last, there too you can get different gauges. That stuff will last just one season. Halfway through the season you'll see where it's kind of stretched on the edges of the bed. It'll fray really, really quickly. But by then your crop is established and weeds are a whole lot less of a problem. And between the rows, really important, we'll see it in some of our last slides where we do our cover cropping. Between all of those rows, before we actually plant our crop, we'll go in and broadcast clover seed. It's a white clover that grows really, really short, and we'll broadcast it on there really, really thick and work it in lightly, then plant our crop. So it'll take off, cover the ground, and keep that biodiversity alive between the rows and serve as a mulch. We don't want to have our staff or guests walking around in the mud. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Planting apple trees on planter premier. Bien important de choisir un bon emplacement. Choose a good spot for your.
Planting apple trees here, you can't hear it very well, but I'll narrate.
Make sure to check in on
This is a video we did for the 4-H kids.
where it's nice and easy, maybe in line with other trees to be.
All of the 4-H kids in our club planted an apple tree from Quinn's farm at their place. They chose out of 3 varieties.
Bien important de garder la terre.
We'll keep as much soil as we can with the root mass of the tree. You don't want to disturb that. If you got soil around your roots, keep it there. Make your hole a little bit larger.
The graft union right here is the graft union. You want that about.
Talking about the graft union, very important to not have that too close to the ground. Otherwise you get a scion-rooted tree and you lose control. I'll delve into that a little bit as soon as we're done with this video. Grafting.
Put it in there. The boys are getting some compost for us, so we're not.
Compost, nice quality soil. Planted straight, ideally.
Straight to.
Right? And very important to tutor your apple tree, to give it a tutor, otherwise that graft union gets stressed and your tree kind of stays stunted. If you tutor it and it's not stressed by the wind, boom, you'll watch it explode. It'll grow twice as fast those first years. There we go, talking about a tutor. And then we use old baler twine to tie it to the tutor. We'll make a figure 8 between the tree and the tutor. Not tied too tight. You want it to stay loose a little bit. You don't want to girdle your tree.
So it's easy. And leave it, give it some room. You don't want to tie it too tight.
So the grafting, every tree, we've got about 12,000 trees on the farm now. Every tree has been grafted. Why do we graft?
To preserve genetics.
Preserve genetics, that's right. If you're wanting to reproduce a Royal Gala or a Macintosh apple, you want to take some tissue off of that tree and propagate it to make more, right? That's how you do it. But whereas if you grab seed from a fruit, whatever served as a male, or whatever provided the pollen for that fruit, it'll be half mum, whatever tree carried the fruit, and half dad, whatever flower provided the pollen. So that way you'll get different genetics all the time. You're not going to get a Macintosh tree out of a Macintosh seed. You'll get a cross. Another reason why do we graft?
Stronger rootstock?
Stronger rootstock or weaker rootstock. If you want a stronger rootstock, you want a bigger tree, you'll choose a 106 rootstock. And M106, it's pretty well standard tree. It'll grow 20, 30 feet tall. It'll be nice and strong. Whereas if you're doing a high density orchard where they're planted really, really close, you want a little bit weaker rootstock. We'll use an M9. M9 are a little bit smaller, or a Bud 9, it's even smaller yet. They're planted every 16 inches and they grow about 10 feet tall, just really, really short. Sorry, really, really slender and tall. We'll graft all of our own trees at the farm. We have been. Lately we're just planting so much that we can't keep up with the grafting. So on the left here, that's the grafting. We'll use a budwood off of whatever variety we chose. There's a brand new variety called Oyase. Oyase out of Oka. Oyase is Mohawk for? Oyase. Mohawk for new apple or new fruit. Very, very, very delicious. It's a cross of Honeycrisp and a Royal Gala. The most amazing apple I've ever eaten. So we're propagating the daylights out of that one. So we'll grab 2 little buds off of the Oyase tree and we'll graft that onto our rootstock. Rootstock would be the M9 or 106, depending on the size of tree you want. If you got a backyard that is huge and you want to fill it, plant a large tree there, no problem. Whereas if you're doing it more intensely, you're going to choose a smaller one. So first thing in May, we'll put them out, and not long after that, you'll see little buds popping up. Planting trees. This here, we're planting Christmas trees with our machine here. You can't see it for the snow, but right here, it's tied to the back of a tractor. It'll open up a trench, and 2 guys sitting on the back, and they're putting trees in as fast as they can at proper intervals, and then 2 packer wheels that will close the trench up and firm the soil up around the roots. On a good day, we can do 3,000–4,000 Christmas trees. Apples take a little bit more time. We're trying to get them nice and straight. Shortly after that, we'll side dress with some fertilizer and make sure we get our drip line on there. You'll see the drip line right there along the row. Keep the water to them, very, very important. If it gets dry, they die. Yes, sir?
How long does it take from the time you plant to harvest? 3 years, 4 years, 10 years?
On an apple tree?
No.
Christmas tree? You're talking somewhere around, thanks for the question. You had asked a question too. Oh, no, you gave me an answer. Perfect. Tree anywhere from 6 to 10 years.
6 to 10 years.
Depending on the species you choose, and then growing conditions as well. If it's dry year after year after year, like 2018, 19, 20, 21 were consecutive dry years. So the growing conditions were a little bit slower. But ideal growing conditions with a nice strong tree, you're talking 6 years. Yep. Norway spruce grow really, really, really fast. That's my new favorite Christmas tree.
Do you talk about stump culture now?
Stump culture, yes. Stump culture, it started back in the late 90s for us. We had some trees that were far too tall for our guests, so they were cutting them up a little bit higher. And the following year, we're just so busy, we didn't do anything with that stump with a few branches on it. It just turned up and made a new tree. Several new trees, yeah. So we do that now like consistently. We always ask our guests to leave at least the bottom whorl of branches, the last whorl of branches right at the ground, it stays with the stump. So we'll cut just above that, and those branches turn up and become new trees a whole lot quicker. Instead of 6 years, you're talking 3-4 years at the most. Seeing how the root system is already established, it'll just take off. It's a little bit more management, not more management than grinding up the old stumps and replanting. So year one, we leave them all there. They'll pretty well all turn up on their own. Apical dominance, trees will do that on their own. If an ice storm happens and they lose their head, whoop, they'll form a new head, very often multiple heads. So year one, we don't touch it. We let that happen. Year two, we'll choose the very best one, the nice straightest and strongest one, and the rest go to make boughs or wreaths. So within 3 to 4 years, we get a new tree. Very important whenever we're planting, there's a big blue drum on the back of the tractor. All of the trees are kept moist all the time. Very important if you're planting. Keep them moist, keep them out of the wind. Those bare roots, if they're in the wind, they die. Apples. Apples are my favorite crop of all. Very, very fun crop. There are so many different flavors, from very, very sour to amazingly sweet. And there are so many different tastes. Our guests love the sweet, and they love the sour, and they love the new varieties, and they love the old heirloom varieties that we grow. We grow over 60 different varieties on the farm. About 40 or so that we market steadily. The other ones are just a collection. There are a few trees of each. And here is our new Oyase. It's huge, beautiful, slightly calcium deficient, like its mama, the Honeycrisp. Talking about biodiversity, we've reduced by 60% the amount of insecticide we use in the farm just by not cutting the grass. Leave the grass long. There's a natural ecosystem that happens there. There are predator insects or beneficial insects that live in that grass, and it's just another source of food for those nasty insects as well. If it's kept like a golf course with very, very short grass, and then you've got apple trees in there, the pests will be up in the trees for sure. Whereas if it's a lush and varied cover crop in your orchard, there's all kinds of stuff working for you there in the orchard.
You ever knock that down? You ever knock that grass down?
Just before harvest. Right before harvest, we'll go in there and cut it all down. On the younger trees, if we see that it's getting out of hand and it's being competitive, we'll go in and cut a little bit every alternate row. We'll do every second row, and then a week later, we'll come back in and do whatever rows we haven't done. So we're always leaving lush grass there for our beneficial insects to be in. Very important. Thanks for the question. A big one. I like that one. Watch your face. You had a couple of good ones too. In the orchard, we'll also do pheromones. I think that's our next slide. It is not our next slide.
The one after.
Varieties, again with the Oyase. Isn't that pretty? And this one here, Pikatsin. All of the little lenticels have a little red blemish to them. Pikatsin, it's tiny, but it packs a punch as far as flavor goes. A new one developed by Ag Canada, Eden. It's a scab-resistant variety. Apple scab is a fungus that will attack the apple trees early on in the spring and be problems throughout the season.
Did you see something like fire blight?
Fire blight, yes, definitely. Yeah. If you see fire blight, cut it out, get it gone. But then we also use streptomycin. Blossom Protect will be the organic, It's a fungus that will colonize the flower. As soon as a flower opens, you spray this Blossom Protect. It's a fungus that will colonize the flower. It doesn't hurt the flower at all, but it's an antagonist for the blight. It works so-so. Insect damage. That one there's the codling moth. Codling moth, we're now using pheromones to control. We'll see it here. We put little pheromone diffusers out every second tree throughout our orchard. That's several thousand little diffusers. We'll put those out. They're sexual pheromones for the codling moth, and same thing for the dogwood borer. So the male of the species will smell this pheromone and go bonkers over it and won't be able to find the female. If the female is not found, she's not going to be laying eggs. She won't be a problem if she's not bred. So we haven't sprayed for the codling moth the last 6-7 years. It's a very expensive venture, but it reduces the amount of insecticide we use. There are 8 or 9 different insects that we follow. The most recent one, what's in the bottom there? Who knows what that is? Not an aphid. Japanese. Oh, the Japanese beetle. Eh? I feel the same, ma'am. But did you know the Japanese beetle cannot reproduce in grass that is shorter than 10 centimeters? Sorry, longer than 10 centimeters, pardon me. If you keep short grass, they'll reproduce like crazy. If it's long grass, they can't find the ground, they won't reproduce. So they're only a problem for us near our buildings where we keep the grass neat and tidy for our guests, near our play area. Our blueberries are right next to our play area and maze. They're a problem there because we cut the grass right next to them. I wish we could afford not to cut the grass there, but through our orchard, the only spot it's a problem, it's new plantings where that cover crop is not established. So we'll put these pheromone traps out. We've got hundreds of these pheromone traps, very expensive. We'll put those out. And then as the Japanese beetle comes in, we'll move those out of the plantation because those pheromones are so strong that if we leave them in the plantation, they're coming in from everywhere. So we'll start from in the plantation and work our way out.
Is that the one the Pimbach covers?
Yeah. If you're into commercial agriculture, if you've got a NIM with the government there, there is a project called Prime Vert for any of these, all of the pheromones, any kind of ecological way of controlling pests.
They'll cover 70% of the cost of them.
Yeah.
Are you just absorbing the cost for yourselves? Or are you in this program?
We're in the program at the beginning. Yeah, the program is fairly new. So if you were avant-garde and you were doing this right from the beginning, it was out of pocket, and then slowly but surely it's helping us. Yeah, big time for the corn as well. We'll see in our corn, we no longer spray for the corn borer. The corn borer is that worm that nobody seems to enjoy on their cob of corn. We'll use a parasitic wasp called Trichogramma. Trichogramma is a wasp that is not indigenous to Canada. Farther south it is, so it's not invasive. As soon as winter comes along, it's dead. But we'll put these out, hundreds and hundreds of little, it's the size of a matchbox, probably the size of this here, hundreds of them. Did I just turn that off? No. Thousands of them that we put out, and they'll colonize the area, and their only mission in life is to seek and destroy the corn borer. They'll sniff them out, all the little baby larvae that are forming at the top of your cob. They'll seek them out and consume them. They'll lay an egg in them, and the larva from that wasp will just devour from the inside. It sounds a little gruesome, but it works. So yeah, 8 or 9 different insects that we follow in the orchard using pheromone traps or sticky traps. Early on in the season, we'll use a plastic plate with a sticky substance on them. That is to control the apple sawfly. Apple sawfly is attracted by the white blossom of the apple. So that big white plate is like a huge blossom. So we'll play a trick on it, and it'll be stuck to that plate, and we can monitor populations and check and see whether or not we need to spray. Farmers don't like to spray. It's very, very, very expensive. It's not good for the environment. It's not good for our health. We'll choose the very, very best products out there that will be efficient and better for the environment and better for our, and more of the technologies are coming ahead and being a whole lot more specific. In our Christmas trees, we'll apply a product called Endeavor for the aphids. Endeavor is specific to sucking insects. You can spray that over top of our honeybees and it won't affect them at all. It will only affect aphids, which are a sucking insect, and it's not an insecticide, it's a hunger suppressant. It's by no means an organic product, it's a chemical product, but it's far, far better than Pyganic. 1,000 times better than Pyganic in my eye. So there's a gray zone there between commercial agriculture that is just putting out chemicals like crazy and organic. That, yes, Pyganic is chrysanthemum juice, but it's a broad spectrum insecticide. It'll kill anything that moves. In the middle, that's where we like to be. As efficient as possible, but as respectful to the environment and our own health as well. We are the first people to consume our product. I eat like 40 apples a day. Keeps you regular. You had a question?
Who on your team decides your IPM, your integrated testing?
Oh, there's two of us that get notifications, myself and our field manager, and it's always a consensus.
But also you're getting information from other...
Oh yes, we got our crop specialists coming into the farm once a week to monitor pests, but then having done it for so long, I'll go to our field manager and say, make sure you have this product on hand because in the next couple of days we'll be spraying for this. And sure enough, within a couple of days we'll get a message from our crop specialist saying, hey, watch out the aphids in the Christmas trees, we need to go spray that, watch out. And I just knew it because we've been doing it for so long and I've been in it since I was teeny tiny. And every spring it's pretty well the same thing, except when a new bug comes along. But what we're doing with the long grass there has helped out immensely with the Japanese beetle.
Any new pest with global climate change?
So, I'm very hard of hearing, I'm sorry.
Do you notice any new insects or pests, birds, whatever, with global climate change?
That Japanese beetle is new to us. It's only the last couple of years it's been there and then being a problem, and it's absolutely brought in from Asia.
How are you preparing your farm to expect more?
We're reading all of the documentation coming in from the States and the West as well. There's a new one I was reading this morning. I forget the name, but it's a lot like the dogwood borer. It'll lay an egg just in the phloem, in the cambium of the bark of the apple tree, and it'll develop, its larva will develop in the cambium there and make galleries and girdle your tree. But we've been dealing with the dogwood borer the last 10 years or so. The dogwood borer has taken off like crazy. And that's how the dogwood borer works. They'll make galleries in the cambium of the bark and kill your tree. And especially on the varieties, the new varieties that are very, very sweet, like the Ambrosia, Gala, Honeycrisp, they really like that sweet juice. It's not only the fruit that's sweet, that there's something in that tissue as well that just, the insects love as well. So we're putting pheromones out for the dogwood borer now. They are working really, really hard for this new insect I was reading about this morning to find pheromones as well for that one. But then Ag Canada, there's a process to follow for these products to be approved, which is silly because it's not a product that is applied on our production at all. It's a pheromone that we put out.
Do you feel Ag Canada is moving fast enough for you?
In some aspects, yes. In some, no. There's some products that we're using that are approved here in Canada before they are in the States, and vice versa. It's stringent, but it's there for a reason. Like we can't be putting stuff out willy-nilly without knowing exactly how it works. I understand the process. Sometimes I wish it was a little quicker.
Do you know if these products are available or costly for plant-based farming?
The pheromones you can get, no problem. Write this down. It's Centre Agricole Bienvenue. If you're into apples at all, Centre Agricole Bienvenue. And for that, my friend. Sylvie Bienvenue and her team
Centre agricole.
Bienvenue. That's where we get all of our products. Yeah, they'll be able to point you in the right direction if they don't have what you're looking for. Codling moth is one that they'll have, and the dogwood borer. And they'll have the pheromones for the other ones as well. If you're a backyard enthusiast, they'll have pheromones for all of the different insects there. On which?
Ants? An issue on your apple tree?
No. More so in the blueberries. The blueberries, they'll make an anthill. We'll try to control the weeds a little bit better in the blueberries, otherwise you don't end up with a crop, right? We will put herbicide down right on the row, leave the rows, between the rows, nice and long. So where that bare ground is, the ants just love that bare ground, and they make colonies in there, and sometimes you'll have 2 or 3 bushes that are stunted, and lo and behold, if you go look, there'll be an ant colony there. Usually ants will be in your trees if you have an aphid problem. They'll go and feed on the aphid feces. You'll see that quite often.
There's so many different species or types of apples. How do you decide which one you're going to put on your farm? Does it have to do with like acidity of the soil, or does it have to go with climate, or which one are most susceptible, or which ones are the most apt to attracting bugs, or what is
Yeah. Consumer trends is what really drives us. If like everyone's wanting a sweeter apple right now. That being said, we are growing some of the traditional ones like Cox's Orange Pippin and the Golden Russet and the Northern Spy, which are old sour varieties that tend to do really well. And a new one that is in the same league, I guess, would be Eden. Eden, developed by Ag Canada, resistant to the apple scab, and also more resistant, more resilient when it comes to the insects as well. So it's a mix. Consumer trends is pretty well our number one. If you don't have Honeycrisp right now, you're missing the boat. Everyone wants a Honeycrisp.
How do you like growing Honeycrisp?
Honeycrisp is a pain in the ass. Oh my goodness, it is calcium deficient. You'll see the little black spots on the apple, those little lenticels that I was talking about. It'll be bitter pit. It'll be a calcium deficiency, and it'll be a very bitter flavor. It's not fun at all, but it's a delicious apple. If you're not growing Honeycrisp, learn how to do it. You need to put the calcium to it for sure.
So if you have this Eden apple and you say it's resistant to certain things, does that mean it's genetically modified?
Nope. That's selection. Genetic selection. Genetic selection has happened for millennia. People that it's genetic selection. We're choosing the sweetest one all the time, and if you take 2 sweet ones and you breed them together, whoa, it gets even sweeter yet. We got sweet corn now. Sweet corn all started with the stuff that Stephen here is growing. It all started there, but then by selecting the sweeter ones, we end up with stuff that is 26% sugar.
So then this Eden that's resistant to certain pests, you just pick the one that's more resistant to that?
You have to have a quality fruit, but then you're also looking for these other qualities that are more resistant, more resilient. It's a quick growing fruit as well, or quick growing tree, pardon me, that will be more resistant to drought. We're seeing more and more drought episodes here in Canada. You have to have a resilient tree. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to ask that.
Long-term storage?
Yeah, storage. What species would you go to
I would highly suggest you look up La Pépinière Rochon in Saint-Joseph-du-Lac, Oka.
Yeah.
And ask them for Oyase. Oyase? How am I saying it wrong?
I don't know the word you're saying.
Maybe Oyase?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Oyase.
It's like fresh.
Oyase.
Oyase, I've been told it's new fruit.
What's that?
Yeah, new fruit or new apple. the best ones for storage, Eden. Eden is really, really good. Developed by Ag Canada, also available at La Pépinière Rochon, just right near Oka. There are new varieties there like the Oyase, Rosinette, Passionata. There are a few other ones there, Picotin. Those are all club varieties developed from Monsieur Roland Joannin in Oka. He has worked painlessly, like his entire life, to breed new varieties of apples. If you look at Oyase, will be the best one. It'll keep till June. If not this spring, next. Yeah. Say that again. Oyase.
Can only get it in Oka?
Yep. Yep.
Didn't you say that?
You can just ask me. I want garlic too.
So didn't you tell me last time that he also gives a percentage of the sales of the tree back to the community?
Yes, the Native Friendship Center in Oka gets $1 from every tree sold. Roland is French from France. His dad fought in the Second World War, and they grew up in France with a large orchard. And then when they joined the European Union, south of France and Italy will be the apple growing regions of Europe. Cut your orchard down. You're growing something else. That's what the family was told. His dad committed suicide after cutting the apple trees.
Wow.
Yeah. So he came to Quebec, and he's so passionate about apples. Very, 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 very respectful to the First Nations of the area, and that's why a percentage, like $1 for every tree, goes to the Native Friendship Center. Yeah. Yeah. Pheromones, we're done with pheromones. Irrigation. We talked about the overhead irrigation. We'll do overhead irrigation very, very seldom to actually irrigate. We'll use it more for frost protection. What we do now will be more of this here. Every line, every row has a drip line on it, and you'll see the difference here. It is staggering to see the difference. You can't really see it in this picture, but within 12 hours, you put the water line in one row, and 12 hours later, you'll see it's considerably higher than the one beside it that didn't get water. And within a few weeks, it's all covered over. Into the brambles. We grow a few brambles. We've had lots of trouble with Phytophthora. Phytophthora is a root disease that really affects the raspberries and brambles. So we've scrapped our old fields and moved everything onto our new land where the root disease has not been there yet, and we're growing varieties that are less susceptible to this root disease. What's the difference between this fruit here and this one, other than the color? Does anyone know what the black raspberry is? Black raspberry and blackberry are not the same thing. They are not. Blackberry grows a little bit later in the season. Not too winter hardy on some of those varieties that are commercially available, like Perron 2000 or the Chester. They just don't like our winters at all, especially the thornless varieties. We just don't grow those anymore. It won't happen. Black raspberries, that grows here. It's native from Canada. Yeah.
That's all there used to be here a long time ago, everywhere.
Yeah, same back home, where we actually take some of those wild ones and just put them in a row and fertilize them, take care of them. Boom, they're huge, they're beautiful.
They're there one day, almost right, and go back the next day,
Just got to grow more. So if you cross a red raspberry and the black one, you'll get the purple one here. The black raspberry is hardly susceptible to the root disease, the Phytophthora, at all. It is native to here. It is learned to live with Phytophthora. That being said, it does do a whole lot better if you plant it on a crown, on higher ground where it's draining easily. It will do a whole lot better. Yes, ma'am.
It's not like things that have been crossing naturally, like my neighbor planted red raspberry, but I got the black raspberry.
Oh, naturally, honeybees, whenever they start visiting flowers, they will only visit one species. Pardon me?
They're going to cross?
No. Naturally, honeybees, when they start pollinating or visiting flowers, they'll only visit one species.
fact. It's been, well, just as a seed farmer, I realized that I was
Yeah.
making mistakes.
Yeah, if you can, absolutely. This was done by human, and same thing for the apples. Roland Joannin, whenever he's propagating apple trees, he will put a bag over flowers before they bloom. And as soon as they're bloomed, he'll grab a flower and go pollinate another one that he's kept hidden, and then hide it right away so that no other bees get to it. And that's how the new varieties come along nowadays. Happenstance has very, very little to do with it now. We're actually selecting this variety because of this characteristic that we want to propagate, and this one, mix the two and see what happens. And that's how you end up with beautiful, beautiful.
Here, I don't have to cut his berries down there.
She doesn't want them to mix.
You don't want them to mix. Don't worry, but the black raspberries, if you plant them, they'll just stay right there unless they touch the ground, right? If you keep them up, they'll stay in a row. They'll stay nice, and as soon as they touch the ground, whoa, that's when you end up with a jungle. Same thing with the purple raspberries. Purple raspberries, they'll stay in a crown. We'll plant them every 5 feet to give them room, because they branch out really, really, really long. But keep them up off the ground, otherwise they'll root. Whereas the red raspberries, they'll make stolons, or they'll make rhizomes that will go and they'll just spread all over the place. Very important if you are doing red raspberries to keep that row nice and tight there. You want 8-10 inches wide at the most. Grab your lawnmower and just have at it. Keep it narrow.
Do you sell beans also, or you're just selling for commercial?
We sell to our own customers, everything on site. We don't do any wholesale whatsoever.
No teas? No, you pick raspberry leaves and sell the tea.
Oh, no. Sorry, I'm hard of hearing.
Which is, I'm glad to hear him say that to you, because I just think he ignores me, but he's actually hard of hearing.
What Holly was saying is you're missing out on a whole opportunity of not making raspberry tea.
All right, we'll get together on that and do it next summer, right? So whenever we're choosing varieties, we're selecting for what we want. We want an amazing flavor, we want good production, we want a resilient plant, we want resistance to some diseases, and we want different maturity dates as well. This is available on the website from Luc Larreau. La Pépinière Luc Larreau is up in La Nadière somewhere? La Nadière, just north of Montreal a little bit, near Joliette Way. This is the list of varieties they have for blueberries. We got the early, mid-season, late, and if you want a bomb-proof one, would be the Patriot. Patriot right here. It is hardy. We've got it planted on our new ground where there are no windbreaks yet. If you're doing blueberries, you need windbreaks. We planted our windbreaks at the same time as our blueberries, and I'm desperately encouraging our windbreaks to grow quicker. They don't like the cold weather, especially tonight, minus 18, 19 tonight, and some wind that acts as a desiccant. All those beautiful little buds for next year, they'll be dried up and dead. That's how it happens. It's just drying out the tissue and it dies. But Patriot is one that is bomb-proof. We'll plant it in the middle of the windiest field we got, and it'll have fruit on it next year. It is bomb-proof. But it doesn't keep well. If you're wanting to wholesale, if you're wanting to sell to the public, you'll pick it today. It'll be amazing and delicious. Put it in the fridge, and then tomorrow it's soggy. But it's bomb-proof. It will produce all the time. Great for you-pick. We'll just put people through there every day to pick it, and love that apple. That blueberry.
So which variety do you plant for longer? Keep longer for the market?
We'll do North Blue. We'll do Chippewa's a good one. Duke is a beautiful one. They are the size of my thumb. I got big thumbs, by the way. Beautiful, beautiful fruit, and it's a quick picking. They'll be all ripe at once. You can just go in there and strip the plant. Super fun, and it'll stay on the plant for a week, 10 days after being ripe. Beautiful, beautiful quality. Duke. Yeah.
Yeah, so a friend of mine right over here in St. Albans, he did a bunch, and he told me that the Patriot, even one tree produced better than 3-4 other ones altogether.
Commercially, we're getting away from the Patriot just because of its keeping quality. But for us, for our store where we're on top of it and selling quickly, or the U-Pick, it's amazing, amazing.
Here's another question.
Maybe making jam, I guess that would be a good one.
Patriot and Duke, yeah.
Pies.
Do you have to spray your berries?
We'll put the pheromone traps out, not pheromone, it'll be vinegar traps for the spotted wing Drosophila. That's a fruit fly that has come in. Talk about invasive species, that's one that I loathe. I hate it so much. Spotted wing Drosophila, SWD. We'll have to spray that end of season there. We'll probably have to do 2-3 sprays.
Well, the reason I asked that, because I have a friend who's from New Brunswick, and he says they're not allowed to even sell berries unless it was sprayed.
Right.
Even in their home garden, they have to spray if you want to sell any of your berries.
Yeah.
So
that's because they have the blueberry fly maggot,
okay,
which is not, it's not in Quebec. It is in the States, but it's not in Quebec yet, so we don't want it moved. If you pick a blueberry with a maggot in it in New Brunswick and you ship it to Quebec, and it goes to the compost pile for some reason, whoop, it's in Quebec now.
Okay.
Spotted wing Drosophila, if you're doing it in your backyard and you've only got a few bushes, Google how to make the vinegar traps, vinegar and a little bit of fruit juice and some red food dye, and you'll be able to do it to control it with a few traps around your bushes. But commercially, it's just not viable to put out thousands and thousands of these traps. So that's one reason why we do a lot of U-Pick. All of what we do is sold on the farm. We don't wholesale anything, so we'll have 2 fields. If we're treating one, we can't pick in there for 2-3 days. It's a 2-day 48-hour re-entry on the product we use. I forget the name of the product. It's a new product that is specific again to the fruit fly. It's a narrow
window.
Yeah, narrow window. So we'll spray one field and pick out of the other, and then vice versa. We'll do a lot of that. 2 blueberry fields, 3 or 4 strawberry fields. Same chart for the, cherries. If you're not growing cherries, check out Luc Larreau. They've got varieties that were developed in Saskatchewan. Very winter hardy, and they're a low bush as well. They won't grow into huge cherry trees. They'll stay bush type. They'll grow maybe 8 feet tall. It's a sour cherry though. It's not a sweet cherry. Sour cherry. East Europeans love them. Orientals really love them. They make amazing pies. Raspberries, you got the different raspberries there. You've got early, mid-season, late. You've got the purples, yellows, and blacks. The yellow, the Anne, it is just amazing. There's no acidity to it as well. It's just sweet. It's so good. Cloudberry, anyone had cloudberry here? Oh, come on, yes. Very similar.
Bake appleberry.
Bake appleberry or cloudberry. Yep. And strawberries. Mid-season, late, and then the day neutrals. 2 different kinds of strawberries grown commercially. We only do the June bearing, which will start sometimes, if we cover them, there'll be late May, early June, going through to 3rd week in July now. Whereas the day neutrals, if you cover them really well over winter, they'll start producing early May. They'll stop for a while the June bearing come on, and then they'll start up again in August and go right through to frost. They involve lots and lots and lots of chemicals for the spotted wing Drosophila. That's one reason why we don't grow the day neutral strawberries. That, and as soon as a blueberry comes along, strawberries are sexy when they're in season, but as soon as there's a blueberry there, our strawberry sales just plummet. So we'll just accept that and keep going with strawberries. Sweet corn. The 2 gentlemen on the right here are British. They had never experienced true Canadian sweet corn until this summer. They are sold now. They'll be the first British to be growing the varieties Vision and Nirvana. 26% sugar on that Vision when it's late season there. Very sweet. And for fun last year, we took and spray painted a corn plant to see how fast they grow. That's 24 hours worth of growth there. It was completely red the day before, and then boop, we got some green in there. They grow so fast. I'd never realized how fast they grow. And we'll plant our corn with a corn planter. And again, some narration from our oldest son this time.
So today we're planting peas and beans. We're actually using a corn planter, and it's basically the same thing. You just put the seeds in right here, and you can adjust the depth with this little knob here. When it's very dry, we want to plant it deeper so that we get more moisture deeper down. But on a moist day like today, we can plant it at about 2 centimeters deep. But this machine here also puts fertilizer in at the same time. So it's pretty cool.
So it's pretty cool. Farm kid loves his machinery. That is our older corn planter. We don't use it very much now other than for planting the peas and beans and maybe our early sweet corn where we'll be working up the ground. But now we're doing a whole lot more cover crops and we're doing a whole lot more direct seeding. We won't be working the ground. You'll see this here is all worked ground. It has been plowed in the fall and then worked in the springtime. It makes it a whole lot more malleable, but then you bust up that soil structure that naturally occurs. The drought cycles and moist cycles, that creates a soil structure. There'll be cracks and fissures and there'll be natural roots and rhizomes that go down into the soil that allow for water capturing. It allows for proper penetration for your irrigation. It allows your roots to go down a whole lot quicker as well. So we're doing a whole lot less of the conventional tillage. We're doing more of the no-till. I did not get a picture of our no-till planter. It's 6 rows instead of 4, and it's really, really, really heavy. And there are springs there putting down pressure on each unit, on each row, so that it goes into the ground. And there are residue sweepers. There's a little sun rake on the front of the unit right here. But the ones on our new planter are a whole lot more aggressive. There's actually 2 rows of these sun rakes that will just move the residue out of the way. And there's a rippled coulter in there as well that will cut the ground, and it's rippled. So whenever it comes out of the ground, it'll just work it up a tiny little bit, and your planter goes in right behind that with seed.
What is your cover crop?
Oh, getting right to that. Hang on a second.
So today we're planting peas and beans.
Oh, did you go down? Yep.
Okay, we'll get to cover crops really shortly, I promise. Pumpkins and squash. We grow probably 30 acres of pumpkins and squash. Half of our acreage now is squash. Stephen just goes bonkers when he comes to our place, and he fills the trunk of his car with squash. And all of that is sold on site. That's a lot of people coming over to pick pumpkins and squash. We do a little bit of wholesale. This year I'm actually taking this bin down to our neighbors because she ran out of squash. We'll grow 30 or so different kinds. And my lovely wife Stephanie made a beautiful sign. This sign right here has all of our different kinds of squash and their characteristics. What are their flavor profiles? How well do they keep? What you can bake with them.
How do you prevent your squash from cross-pollinating?
Oh, we don't keep much seed of our own. We'll buy them in. We're going to start. For the last 10 years now, I've been saying, we're going to start keeping our own seed. And then summer comes along and we're busy up to here. It'll just happen. We're not keeping seed per se, but I have the best of intentions. Definitely put a bag or just tape the flower shut before it opens up. And as soon as you see it wanting to explode, that's when we would take the male flower. 2 different flowers on the Cucurbitaceae. That's the family they're in. The male flower and the female flower. You want to be taping one of each there on the same vine to propagate.
And I actually really enjoy crossed squash. You get some neat flavors, you get some completely different from what we're used to once they've cross-pollinated, and they will have volunteers that sort of seed themselves next year, and you just get some interesting looking squash, but some interesting tasting squash.
We had a butternut. I think it was crossed with a spaghetti squash or something. It was usually butternut will be a very, very malleable flesh, great for making baby food. There's no fiber to it very much, but this one here was, I would call it an heirloom, but it wasn't. It was totally cross-pollinated, but amazing flavor, like a nutty, really, really, really pronounced squash flavor to it. Some people are turned off by that, but I loved it. But it was more fibrous. You could really see that, oh wow, it looked like a butternut. It had all of that meat with a little bit of seed on the end, but all kinds of, and it was a dark, like fluorescent orange, beautiful, like a little bit darker than the cap on your bottle there, as far as the flesh goes. Beautiful.
I was just going to ask about disposing of fruits and vegetables that have been affected by pests or fungus. You don't want to spread it.
Right.
Other fruits that haven't been affected, is there a different way to treat things that are infected or predated?
Very, very important when we're doing it commercially to keep on top of it. As soon as you see an infected plant, usually it'll come in on the turbin. Turbin will be your first one to be affected.
Turbin squash.
Turbin squash. And for the cucumber beetle, its favorite will be the blue Hubbard. So we'll actually plant in the middle of our field a row of blue Hubbard and a row of turbin, and we'll keep an eye. That's what we'll go ahead and do our scouting. That's what we'll look at first. They'll be the first infected with your virus, will be the turbin, and the first ones affected by the cucumber beetle will be your blue Hubbards. Thank you. Very important to keep on top of it. And not last year, the one before, the mosaic virus was huge all across Quebec. Anyone who didn't get their planting done early, if you planted it any time after June 1st, your fruit were affected, your crop was affected, and it was horrible. I like to plant, our frost-free date is usually May 20th. I like to have the seed in the ground by May 15th. It has emerged by May 20th, and it's boom, exploding. Traditionally, the squash were planted in June, and all of the growers nearby here, they're late putting them in. I gauge it, I look at last year's pumpkin fields, and as soon as you see the old pumpkins starting to germinate, well, I should have had my seed in the ground a week ago. Mother Nature knows what she's doing. If she's pulling the trigger on last year's seed, you need to be doing the same. If you get it in early, your plant will grow, the fruit will start to form before that virus comes in, and by the time the virus came in for us in 2000, not last year, the year before, 2022, all of our fruit were hardened off, and yes, the foliage was affected, but our crop was not affected at all because we got it in early. And the way we go about solving that problem, getting rid of the old or infected tissue, is crop rotation. We'll have a really, really good 3 or 4 year rotation where pumpkins are not coming back to this field for another at least 3 years. Yes, sir?
A pumpkin seed doesn't freeze either. So the pumpkin seed does not freeze.
Well,
it doesn't freeze. That's because there's a natural oil in it.
Okay, yeah.
The Germans used it in the war to make oil for their army tanks.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a historical fact.
Huh. Thanks for that. You need some garlic. No, I've already got 3 of them. Never mind. Oh, that was close to your eye. I really want to ask a question, but never mind the garlic. Biodiversity on the farm. You'll look on the left side here. That's a handful of seeds. There are 16 different crops growing. Cover crops. She asked a question about cover crops. We're talking cover crops. 16 different seeds there. Very important to have some, the brassicas. The brassicas, I learned this year from our son's science fair project, brassicas will go into the soil, and naturally, the calcium and phosphorus will bond together and not be available for your plant to absorb. Together, your plant cannot absorb them, only apart. That's why we got to keep putting phosphorus and keep putting calcium out every year all the time, and our plants are just deficient all the time, because naturally, as soon as those two compounds are in the ground, boop, they'll bond together, and your plant can't absorb it. Brassicas will absorb that, brick it up, and make it available for other plants. Isn't that cool? Your mind is just blown, isn't it?
Well, because I grow seed and I have excess of rutabaga seed and turnip, and I was like, maybe I could use it as a cover crop.
Definitely.
Do it. Yeah.
I am planting for the first time kale as a cover crop. It'll live longer in the fall and die off. 2 years ago it didn't die off. It lived through the entire winter.
I just leave it there.
Yeah, leave it there, and next year's crop will be able to take the calcium and phosphorus that have been taken apart naturally by the brassicas and absorb it. So every year I mess with your head. I should have brought a jar of our cover crop mix is what I should have brought. That's even sexier than the mixed corn. So 16 different crops. Very important to have your legumes in there as well. What's our legumes? Beans, peas, clover, vetch. Vetch, the hairy vetch, very, very expensive seed, but we put it in there. What does it do?
What about rye?
Definitely rye as well. It's not a legume though. It'll fix nitrogen. It'll take the nitrogen out of the soil and fix it into the ground. Now, are the brassicas nitrogen fixing?
Well,
they are not.
Doing calcium and phosphorus.
They're very good at separating the calcium and phosphorus, but they are not nitrogen fixing. They won't take nitrogen out of the ground and put it into the ground. But the legumes that do that,
Don't they take it out of the air?
But you keep saying taking it out of the ground and put it in the soil.
sorry,
Take it out of the air.
the legumes will take nitrogen out of the air and fix it into the soil. Thank you. Sorry, I have trouble with my wordations sometimes.
So it makes it like a legume, basically.
Bingo!
Fixing the nitrogen in that.
What are those little nodules? What are those little nodules that are full of nitrogen on the roots of your hairy veg? Okay. There are little nodules that are full of the nitrogen that are formed on the roots of your legumes. The brassicas are not nitrogen fixing. They won't have those little nodules, but the sugars released by your brassicas stimulate the formation of those nodules.
And if you leave those nodules in the ground to decompose, will then you have more nitrogen available?
Bingo. So naturally your legumes, if you have a field of clover, look at that picture number 3, it's a field of clover, it'll be fixing lots of nitrogen. But if you add the brassicas in there in that mix, you're also stimulating a further production of those nitrogen nodules. It's just compounded if you add that biodiversity, if you're adding your rye, we've got some rye, we've got millet, we've got sorghum. We'll actually have put the soybeans in there as well. Oats, definitely, oats, wheat, and we'll plant that between the rows in our corn. This is actually in our cornfield. Whenever the corn is at 5 to 10 leaf stage, just before you can't drive over it anymore, we'll go in there and plant our cover crop between the rows. So it's going to colonize your ground and keep the weeds from coming up. It's going to act as a canopy and close everything off. And it'll kind of lie dormant there while your corn is growing. Your corn is on top of that. It'll be a canopy as well, but as soon as you harvest your corn and the leaves start to die down, boom, it explodes. So that's the reason why we're thinking of using our corn stubble for mulching our strawberries. We're going to be able to go in there and steal that organic matter, which we usually leave on the field. Usually we want to leave as much organic matter on the field as possible. But we're going to be able to afford to steal that mulch for our strawberries, seeing how we've got this cover crop growing and helping and feeding our ground.
Reading about wheat but I never talked to a person that used it as a mulch.
We use it all the time. Yeah. That is my favorite question so far. I didn't throw it at you. So there are winter cereals. You got winter rye, winter wheat, winter barley as well. This is our first year growing winter barley. It'll be the first time we're doing that. You plant that late summer, fall. It'll grow. It'll act as a cover. It'll keep your soil from eroding. It'll feed your soil late fall. We'll actually have other cover crops planted in with it. It'll live through the winter. First thing in the spring, whenever the snow is gone, it'll just explode. It'll start growing right away. By 1st of June, it'll be 5-6 feet tall. Yeah, well, you can use it for the cereal. You can harvest the cereal and then harvest the straw for mulch as well. But we don't. We'll have some acreage where we'll harvest the straw. Most of what we plant, we'll actually roll that down and plant our pumpkins. No till. We'll not work the ground. We'll plant directly into this tall stubble of rye. We'll roll it down, and then your pumpkins will explode and grow on top of that. They'll grow on a mulch. So we're not working the soil. That mulch is going to keep the fruit off the ground, keep them from being affected by any root disease or root fungus. It'll be clean for our guests. A whole lot cleaner fruit whenever we come to sell it in the store as well. No need to wash it because it's growing on straw. Your soil will be protected from any drought as well, a whole lot more drought tolerant because there's a cover there, whereas if it was just bare ground, it's just evaporating. A mulch there that will protect for weeds as well. It'll cover the ground, keep weeds from emerging.
What about grass?
If we put that in late season, before it can make a head, and it'll die off in the fall, no problem. If you put that in early season, it'll make a head, and next year, hold on to your hat, you've got a real bad weed. Yeah. Yep. Annual ryegrass.
It's not annual then, really. I mean, it is the root guys, but this...
Right. Your seed bank will just be a problem for you. We see this almost every year, a turtle in our strawberry fields making its nest, and over here, a killdeer. Every year we go to cultivate our sweet corn, and we got little flags all around the field. Oh, there's a nest there. Let's go around that. Composting. Poor Alex again. Oh my goodness, he can't do compost there. Too much bureaucracy. We do it. Probably 1,000 loads, close to 1,000 loads a year that come in of compost material. That's wood chips, leaves, grass clippings, anything that will compost, we'll throw it in there, and we'll use it as a mulch on pretty well all of our crops, all of our ground. In the orchard, putting the compost down has kept some of the weeds down under the rows. I explained earlier that we don't cut the grass until harvest. So we got to do something to suppress the weeds right under the trees a little bit. We'll put some mulch down. And we all know what mulch does. It's great for the water, moisture retention. It'll feed your natural flora and fauna. The fungus that is in there will decay and act as your nitrogen source. So we're reducing every year as well the amount of fertilizer we use. That corn fertilizer you saw in the corn planter, we cut the recommended rate by 50%, just because we've got a high organic matter in there feeding our soil already, and we've got all of these amazing cover crops that will fix nitrogen in the soil for us. La pièce de résistance in our fertilizer, the 3 letters, NPK, what do they stand for? You guys already got the jelly. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potash. K is the potash. It's weird. I don't know why it's... And again, this is cover crops in our pumpkin patch. I explained earlier that we plant through that rye stubble. But then as soon as the plants are established, It's great. There's cover there. The plants are growing. But then late season, that canopy kind of dies down and it's just bare ground with fruit on it there. That ground's not being fed. It's not being kept alive. So just as soon as we see the first yellow leaves on our corn, on our pumpkin and squash, we'll go in and broadcast. We'll use our fertilizer spreader with that 16-way mix of cover crops, and we'll spread that over top of the canopy, the pumpkins that are growing, and as soon as it dies down, poof, the cover crop explodes. We've got cover crop growing there right through to Christmas. It's feeding our soil, it's capturing all of those les unités thermiques, heat units, the heat units that the sun is just giving us. It is capturing all of that and putting it into the ground for you. It is keeping that ground alive.
So when you put the winter rod down,
yep.
It ends up turning like...
It's a mulch.
Yeah, like straw. And then there's nothing that's on the ground, or
no, the ground is covered. I'm not worried about the ground cover, but there's nothing living. There's nothing alive. There's no crop there keeping your soil alive. Bare ground is evil. It is evil. Even if you've got it covered with mulch, if there's nothing growing there, it's not feeding your soil. Imagine if you got the brassicas and the
So then, like, would you, like, if I have the winter rye coming up soon, like,
yep.
Then I would wait a little bit for it to be taller, then cast it out, or?
No, the winter rye, are you planning on harvesting it?
No, I was using it just because it's a part of the farm I just don't want to deal with right now.
Great way to do it. If you've got any neighbors that want the straw or grain, go ahead and...
I actually want the straw. I mean, I buy straw. I might as well.
You don't be afraid to harvest that. It'll be harvested end of June, July. You've got all kinds of time to grow another cover crop there.
Okay, that's when I can cast.
Yeah, just watch if you're tile drained. If you got tiles, last year on that newly tiled land, we had cover crops growing, and our tillage radish. The tillage radish, it just wants to go down and decompact that soil for you. It goes down 6 feet. We planted it way too early. Our tiles are completely blocked. Blocked with roots. Just a big blob of roots, and we've got some flooding issues. So if you are tiled, don't be planting any of the brassicas, any of those tillage radish until 15th of August. Okay. No earlier than that. 15th of August, they'll get right to the tile and they'll die off with the frosts. We'll do rotational grazing through our Christmas trees with our sheep. We've got 30 or 40 ewes that are going to be lambing out sometime April, May. And as soon as the lambs are big enough, everyone goes outside to the Christmas trees and they go around our Christmas tree plantation all summer long, keeping the weeds down. And as soon as they're done with the apple picking, we'll move the sheep into the apple orchard as well to keep the weeds down and just get everything down, because one downfall of having all of that organic material there is mice. And mice in an orchard is deadly. They'll girdle the trees, they'll eat the cambium around the tree and kill your tree. And then look at those sexy roots on your cover crops. This will be your rye, winter rye here. Brassicas over here. I don't know what this one is. Summer annual legumes. You want those roots to go down as late into the season, right into Christmas if you can. That's why we're putting in the kale. We'll be buying a full 25 kilo bag of kale and mixing that in, because it lives a whole lot longer than the other brassicas. I'm done.
What's the best way to keep the birds from eating your new floor?
So
Good question.
we will be spending about $10,000 on a new laser thing for the birds. Most importantly, as soon as the corn is just about ready to harvest, they'll come in and just devastate the top of each cob. The blackbirds or the grackles, they'll come in and just wreak havoc. So we got a new laser thing. It's putting sound out as well. We put it up in the middle of our field at about 10 feet high, and it just shoots laser all over the place, and the birds really don't like it. There are some smaller versions that you use for your backyard.
Until I witnessed them chasing away the squirrels.
It's balance in your ecosystem, eh?
What was your son's science fair project?
He did it on cover crops, specifically on cover crops and their benefits.
You did experiments or?
Yep. In our basement, there were grow lights in our basement. I don't know what the cops thought of that, but grow lights in our basement, and he had huge Rubbermaid totes there with the different crops mixed in there. He did water retention as well. He just took a tote that was full of soil and punched some holes in the bottom of it and ran water through it, and then measured how much soil residue was in that runoff. And it's staggering how much soil just left. But then the one right next to it with the cover crop in it had quite literally zero soil runoff. Yeah, it was not clear, but like a T. It was amazing. Yeah, he's going to regionals with his. He's very stressed about it. No, there's all kinds of literature out there that has already proven and measured that. But for fun, he researched it again this morning, and he'd like to cut all of the 16-way mix, the mix of seed that we got. He'd like to cut that and send it out for analysis to see what kind of nitrogen fixation there is, what kind of calcium, what kind of potassium as well. Sorry, phosphorus. Because phosphorus is something that we really need to work at reducing in our environment, because all of that blue-green algae that is happening in all of our waterways, it's because we're putting it on every year. We're putting it on, and it's running off. Yep. So the cover crops there will keep the running off from happening. It'll keep the nutrients there, but it'll also allow us to reduce the amount of fertilizer we're using.
Are we talking about runoff from the farms or the lack of natural percolation and drainage in the creek system?
It's one and the same now. Our conventional farmland, the way we've been doing it for the last 50, 60 years, it's not viable. It is not. We really need to think cover crops. We need to work with the ecosystem that is there. Plant biodiversity is our friend, absolutely. And we're seeing that the only ground we're working up right now is in preparation for strawberries. Strawberries are a very delicate plant. We don't have a choice but to work up the ground, and our vegetables as well. Vegetables and our strawberries, but as soon as our beds are shaped, cover crop. And we'll be experimenting for the first time cover crops in strawberries this summer.
The same mix or a different?
Different mix. It'll be pretty well just rye or any kind of cereal that is easy to kill off. Yep. So without further ado. Talking fertilizer?
No, on the strawberries, they're always spraying for pesticides. Are you using on the strawberries?
Well, it entirely depends on what pests you're wanting to cover. Every year it could be a multitude of 10 or 12 different kinds of pests. Some years we don't treat at all for some, and other years, oh my goodness, it's never ending. The aphids in our strawberries is never ending. We got to spray and spray and spray and spray.
It's wet years that are the worst, right? Wet years make you spray more.
For fungus, yes. But insects, it entirely depends on your weather, how much heat you get, how much drought. On dry years, watch out for aphids. Watch out. But there again, if you got cover crops planted in there, we don't spray insecticides at all in our strawberries anymore. The tarnished plant bug, if you ever see a strawberry that's got like a cat face to it, that's the tarnished plant bug that took a little bite out of it while it was growing, while it was teeny tiny. The tarnished plant bug will come in, or even while it's in flower, But if you got cover crop, if you got strips planted in there of your red clover, white clover, and other crops growing in there as well, there's natural predators in there that will take care of it. We don't spray insecticide on our strawberries anymore. We'll do fungicide because otherwise with our climate here, it's just hot and humid in the summer. Gray mold, nobody wants that gray mold on the strawberry. But there again, if it's dry, we don't need to spray for it. Keep your irrigation underground, keep that foliage dry, 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 dry. Anyone else?
Cover crops just in between the rows, right?
Well, this summer on newly established strawberries, we'll be doing a cover crop between rows. We'll be shaping our beds really, really early in the season and then cover crop between the rows. But then our established fields that have been there for 1, 2, 3, 4 years will have strips where we need strips to let public into our fields. We'll have cover crop growing on those strips. That has helped out a lot. Our crop specialist was reticent. He didn't like it at all because, oh, what about the mildew, powdery mildew? It's going to infect your entire, clover is renowned for powdery mildew, and it's going to infect your strawberries. Don't worry about that. Don't. And it hasn't been a problem. It's a different strain of powdery mildew. It's not the same at all. 4-H! I gotta go put my 4-H sweater on.
Put your 4-H sweater on. Feel free, if you need to get a coffee, go to the washroom. Feel free to do that. So just have a show of hands, who here has heard of 4-H? Yeah, great. When you think of 4-H, what do you think of? What first comes to mind when you think of 4-H?
Little kids and farms.
Little kids and farms. At the county fair, showing cows, yeah. Yeah. We're pulling green chickens at the fair. 4-H is actually a lot more than what we typically, it's where we see them often at the county fair showing their cows, but there's a lot of activities that they do that's maybe not out in the public that they are doing. Phil, can you capture a picture so that I can share it on the Quebec 4-H page? So the basis of 4-H, this is what they stand by, and it's called Learn to Do by Doing, and they really emphasize that young people learn by doing things themselves. So by show of hands of all the adults in the room, how many of you have made mistakes in life? The great thing with 4-H is we want to let them do things themselves, and sometimes they're going to make mistakes and all of that, and that's how we learn, right? So we let them organize things, we let them plan things, we let them come up with ideas, and they come up with a fundraising idea, and then nobody shows up and it falls flat. And the great thing about that is that they learn and they come back and they go, well, what did we do wrong? Did we not market it? Is it the wrong time? Is it not something people are interested in? And they learn from that to be able to do better for the future. So we're really huge on letting them grow their own garden, and something dies and they're discouraged, but the great thing is that at a young age, they're learning how to do better for next year. The other sort of underlining part of 4-H is the pledge, and we'll have these kids say their pledge when they have meetings. So they pledge their head to clearer thinking, their heart to greater loyalty, their hands for larger service, and their health for better living, for their club, which is their little group here, for their community, their country, and their world. And this is really the underlining basis of we want them to be thinking critically, we want them to be helping their community, we want them to be caring for animals, for the planet, and we want them to live a better life. So some of the things that they can be doing other than just showing cows or funny colored chickens, there are garden clubs, there are rabbits, they're raising rabbits or showing rabbits at fairs. They can be learning archery, they can be learning beekeeping, they can be doing cooking and baking and sewing and photography. And anything else they come up with. If they say, I want to learn how to fly a kite, it doesn't matter. It's something that they want to learn, it's a skill, and we can help them figure out how they can find someone to teach them that, how they can go about making that happen. So it really comes from, in our 4-H club, what we do is we start at the beginning of the year with the young people, and we do brainstorming, and we say, write down all of the things that you want to learn, and we put all the ideas up there, and then we have them vote, and they go and they put stickers next to the ones that they want to do, and they decide decide what they want to learn. And then we go, great, you want to learn how to do welding. So how are we going to do that, right? And we help them figure out how to plan. Who could teach us? Is it going to cost us something? How are we going to pay for that? How are we all going to get there? Because it's going to be maybe far away. When in the calendar? Because kids are great. They get all these ideas and they put it in the calendar, and then the parents go, well, that's like 3 days a week, every day, every week, and that's too much. So how do we bring that back to something that's more reasonable? But really they can do anything and they can do multiple. So our 4-H club, they'll learn how to show cows, but they also have a garden club, and they also have a square dance club, and they also have a small animal club with rabbits and chickens. And not everybody's in anything. It means that of all the things our club offers, some people are interested in cows, some people only square dance, some people do all of them because they're interested in everything. So there's a wide variety available for them. Sometimes we all meet together as a whole club because we want to figure out how we're fundraising and what our calendar looks like. And sometimes just the garden kids will get together and they'll talk about just specific garden things. And Stephen came out and talked to them about the Three Sisters a couple of years ago because that was what they were going to do in their garden that year. Was the Three Sisters that they were growing in their gardens. So yes, this is what we imagine 4-H kids look like, right? Showing calves, and they're welcome to do that. It's one of the hardest projects to get into because you have to find a dairy farm and you have to go and practice every day. But there's much more accessible stuff. So this is our group decided to do some woodworking. They're helping the local fair. They decided to put in a goat walk. So they want the goats on this side of the barn to walk up and over people and into that side of the pen. So one, it was a community service. They were giving back to the fair by building it for them. But they learned a whole bunch of skills on carpentry and building, and they did it. So Phil was there, he showed them, he made sure they were safe, because we want to make sure they're safe, but they were absolutely learning these skills to build something themselves. And they were so excited. The sense of achievement in young people when they've built it themselves is just incredible. It really builds their self-confidence. These are some of the pictures. So there's our Three Sisters pictures from a couple of summers ago. These kids are learning about cover crops, so they were putting cover crops in their garden once they harvested everything, and we're excited to show us their pictures of how well it was doing. So the garden club will meet, we'll supply them with seeds so they can get started. There will be some education on how to do it. There'll be a check-in later, and then kids like a little bit of competition. And in 4-H, we often work on, not that competition's necessary, but what happens in a competition is someone comes and judges your garden and gives you a score sheet and gives you some comments and some feedback, and that process helps you be better for next year. It gives you feedback on how you can strive to be better. So we'll have a judge go around to all of the gardens and judge them and ask them questions on their knowledge about their garden, and then they'll harvest. So they'll harvest whatever they've grown and they'll enter those in a competition. So maybe their carrots win, or maybe their beets win, and then we'll have a prize at the end of the year for the best person who had, the best garden, which just gives them something to strive for, but also keeps them working to be better, because we want to learn more and we want to continually get better at what we're doing.
Kids decided this year to give half of their production to food banks.
Yeah, and that's part of the giving back to the community. So they said, when we enter all our vegetables at the fair, afterwards they all ended up in the garbage. Why can't we just box those up and donate them after? Yeah, I love working with them. We do. I also love listening to a group of young people in a meeting because they're so direct. When we're adults, some of you are on committees with adults, right? And we're so polite, really. Whereas young people will just go, what are you doing on your cell phone? Get off your cell phone and pay attention. Like, they'll just tell you, which as adults we would never say. Young people will just come out and say. So you can do baking, you can do cooking, and same thing. They've baked these things, they've brought them to a competition, they've been judged by someone, they've received feedback on how they could make the cookie was a little burnt on the bottom, or it was a little soft in the middle, so that they're always striving to be better at what they're doing. And this was an activity, we can do crafting. So this craft day was a wind chime from recyclable materials. So they had to bring stuff with them. We had the tools and everything they needed to try to put something together and assemble a wind chime. And they all came in and learned. And so they're learning skills, they're cutting wire, they're being creative. So their opportunities are endless. The key is it's youth run. And it's a difficult concept sometimes to get people to embark on. We sometimes say, you know, we want a youth voice in our councils, and so we create a youth seat. But it's a little bit of tokenism, isn't it? Saying we're going to fill that seat because we want a youth voice versus we believe that you are capable of making good decisions and we're going to let you do it. So they absolutely have their own executive. They'll run elections, right? You'll have a president and a secretary and a treasurer. We coach them. My son's the treasurer. I sit down with him and I help him make sure that he knows how to do it. It's his second year now and he's putting together a budget and he's, you know, doing all the bookkeeping, which is fantastic because in my business, maybe one day he'll be able to take over the bookkeeping from me. So that's a skill set I want him to learn. So they run their own meetings. So they sit down, they have an agenda, like an official meeting. They have a president that's going to chair that meeting. We will coach them ahead of time. So we'll sit down with the president ahead of time as an adult and say, let's make sure we're talking about this, and these are the things, don't forget. But then we let them run the meeting. We let them come up with the ideas and figure out what they want to do. And help them through that planning. So you want to do these activities, how are you going to pay for it? Are you going to have to do fundraisers? We need to have someone like Stephen come in and talk to us about gardening. Who's going to call him? Who's going to make sure he can come? And we try to encourage them to do all of those things to plan it. So this is our group of young people at their annual meeting where they were running the meeting. We have the agenda up there, but it's really the adults are sitting at the back of the room quietly and letting them do it. Community service.
Or young.
Pardon?
It doesn't attract young ladies, the 4-H club? Looks like mostly teenage boys.
They...
That center is Riley.
In our club, it's just we just happen to have a lot of boys of that age, and the next age group down is all girls. As families, we all had boys first and girls second somehow, so it just, I would say there's actually statistically far more girls in 4-H than there are boys. It's just an age thing in our particular club.
Especially in the organization, yeah. Presidents, everyone's on the board is very, very strong.
I would say the provincial board is almost all girls.
How do you coach them? Like, how do you introduce concepts? If you want them to organize, but see that they should be doing something, how do you coach them to show them?
Yeah, so we'll often, what we have on the 4-H club is the young people will choose leaders. So in our club, we have 50 kids and we have 4 adult leaders. I'm the overall leader. So I'll be the person who checks in with them and I'll often ask them questions, right? So how do you think that went? How do you think you could do it better next time? And then we have adult leaders who are specific. So we'll have a leader who's for the garden club who has that knowledge and can help them in gardening. And we'll have a leader that's for the animals. And so those people will be specific to that. And when they want to learn something, we say, well, who could we bring in to teach us that? So we want to learn more about gardening. Who do we know that we could reach out to come? And we'll do what we call, a workshop where somebody comes in and teaches us that we can then go home and practice and do on our own. So in trying to learn their skills, they'll bring adults in to teach them something. And so then we're always there coaching them, right? Asking questions. How can we do that better? What do you...
Instead of being a top-down, you should be doing this, you should be doing this. Hey guys, if you found out doing that, I saw this. It looked pretty cool. What do you think? Instead of being a top-down, this is how you should be.
And so we'll give them recommendations, and then ultimately, as a young people, they'll decide. So then somebody says, I think that's a great idea, and they'll make a motion. I move that we should do that next time, and they'll vote on it, so that it's really coming from them in terms of decisions. Conflict, that's great. We actually have very thorough, so we have a code of ethics that everybody has to sign. So it goes through in terms of conflict management and how we interact and engage with one another. We have some really strict protocols in terms of adult involvement, in terms of police screening and training to be safe, working safely with young people. And then if there are conflicts within a club that we can't resolve, then there is an entire process that kicks up provincially, and if we can't solve it there, kicks up nationally. So I'm involved in one right now where provincially there's just too many of us that are at conflict of interest, and so we've asked the national to come in and interview everybody and give us their suggestion on how to resolve that. And in a particular case, it could be that there's an adult who is sort of bullying and destructive that we're going to suspend, and they're not going to be allowed to attend in order to keep it a safe space for young people. So there's very much a system in place to ensure their safety. We always make sure that there are at least 2 screened adults in attendance because we just want to make sure that those young people are safe at all times.
Don't be afraid either to have a third party come in and judge.
Yeah, we'll come in and mediate. We'll interview everybody, and we'll have a mediator come in and help in any kind of conflict. And we have a structure set up to do that. Yeah.
Does that include parents too, or?
So parents, so we just, the overall leaders, right? If you have a general leader, if you have a garden leader, those people have to be screened and have to have some training to make sure that they understand how to safely run activities for young people. And that's just thinking through, is this something that could be dangerous? And how are we going to make sure it's not dangerous? Whereas other parents can come and help. So long as they're not organizing and in charge. We want to make sure the adults organizing have at least some basic training. It's not a lot, it's not complicated, but just some base training to make sure we're safe with young people. Yeah.
Do you ever bring in like community leaders, fire chief, chief of police, ambulance service? Do you ever have them like make presentations to them?
Yep. So our group, we'll have like an annual banquet at the end of the year where we have a supper, we have some awards, and we might have a speaker come in and talk about something really interesting. We do a lot of different outings. Let's go and learn about, right? It could be the fire hall and have them explain about that. Additionally, maybe they need some support, so what could we do to help maybe raise some money for that fire department that is in need of funding? And that's a really key component. Let's learn about how they work and then realize that they kind of raise a lot of their own money in order to provide this service to us, so then what can we do to help them out?
It's incredible to see how the kids involved in 4-H end up being amazing leaders as adults. Because they've been raised through the ranks. They've been introduced to leaders, and they've been taught how to do this democratically and politely and with respect with one another. It's just amazing to see how strong and dedicated a leader they become as an adult.
Question. When they have the general meetings, are parents invited to observe what happens, or are they?
Yeah, so each club runs slightly differently, right? Everybody does what works for them. So in our club, I would say half of the parents stick around and half of the parents drop them off and leave, and that's okay. I would say certainly there are clubs where the parents have become too vocal and too involved, and they've sort of scaled back and said, okay, for the next couple of meetings, we're just gonna have the kids and the leaders that have been chosen, just so that they can get their feet under them and get the confidence, right, to have those meetings without people jumping in. We have other clubs where the parents are just very quiet and happy to sit in the back, and so we have years where they're all sitting there listening, because sometimes as a parent, you just want to write down what was said, so that, because your kid comes home and goes, we're going to do this, and you go, when? I don't know. Well, what do we need? I don't know, right? So sometimes the parents just want to be there to get information, but we always make sure to share that out afterwards. But certainly if there's too much adult involvement, then we'll simply say, we're just going to have a few meetings with the kids only, just to make sure we all know what kids are like. If your parent's in the room, are you going to defer to your parent, or you're going to speak up for yourself? You're likely going to defer to your parents, right? So the first couple of meetings, I think it's always good. And at the beginning of the year when we do our annual meeting, right, I make sure all the parents are in the back, and we do brainstorming, and they each get their own paper, and they each have a voice of saying what we're going to do in the year. Because some of them are quiet too, and they're not going to raise their hand and say, I want to do this. But if you give them a paper so they can write their ideas down, we have little 8-year-olds coming up with some of the best ideas we've ever had, right? So there's just different tricks, and we have a lot of content and resources to help parents and adult leaders figure that out into, here's a great way, and I think the great thing is the networking, because we have other clubs. When you go, we're having this issue, we get to chat as adult leaders and go, well, maybe you could try this, because that worked really well. I remember one time, there's out in Richmond in the Eastern Townships, I came in and she had really young kids. She didn't have a lot of older kids because it goes from 6 to 21, so it's a big age group. And whenever you'd ask them to vote, they'd look and see what their friends, oh, you're voting? Okay, I'll vote too. Oh, you're voting? Okay, I'll vote too. And she kind of went, well, you're not really thinking for yourself whether you want to do this. So she'd make them all put their heads down on the table and close their eyes and vote like this. Because then they were thinking for themselves. And I thought, you know, how many times in an adult meeting, how much better it would be if we made all the adults close their eyes when they voted? I think we'd have better decisions, right?
Experiment on that. I forget the name of the experiment.
But we have an opportunity to do it with young people and teach them to think for themselves and think critically.
How much, age, so you said there's different age levels, so maybe a higher level go to a younger level and present? Did a younger level ever ask a higher age group to come and do it?
So we tend, a lot of you know Scouts, right? Like Beavers and Scouts and stuff, and they tend to be broken up very clearly by ages. In 4-H, we do a lot more of the ages together. We feel, sometimes you have to, in terms of learning, like the older kids have already learned this, so we're just gonna split them out and teach them a sort of a higher level learning, but we do a lot together because there's huge value for an 8-year-old sitting watching the 21-year-old leading the meeting. There's an example there that they can learn from, and we'll often use the older members. So I'm a coach of square dancing, and our older members come for the whole practice and they help teach the younger kids, and then we split out and the older kids go and get to practice their stuff. It's more complicated, and we bring the young kids and we teach some more basic stuff. But in 4-H, I think there's, because we don't want too much parent involvement, we very much rely on those older 4-H kids to help teach to the younger ones coming up, and use them. We'll use them as junior leaders, we'll use them as junior chaperones when we're doing events, because they're 21 and they can help watch younger kids, but it gives them someone to look up to. So this is some of the community service stuff, just some ideas our club has done. We went into the old folks residence. We've brought in small animals. We've played cards. We've done some dancing. So it's, you know, something they try to do just to give back into their community. Whenever they have a big event and everybody's coming, they'll ask people to bring food donations, and we'll take that food over and donate it to the food bank. And then fundraisers are a big part, because if they want to do activities, we don't want to be asking parents to pay for stuff constantly. We want the kids to be independent in raising their own money, figuring out how much they have, and then what they can do with it, right? It's part of the entire process. When you're running a municipality, you can't just ask everybody for more money. You have to figure out within what you have what you can do. So these kids are selling ice cream at the local fair, they can do bake sales, they have a number of different things that they can do to raise their own money. And then a big part of it is public speaking skills. I find in our school system we seem to be doing less and less of it. The kids aren't developing those skills. But we do it in a number of different ways. For young people in a meeting, we'll ask them to give a report. Right? So we'll go through the meeting and say, oh, you just went to that activity last weekend. Could you just tell us about it? It's just a great way for them to learn to stand up in front of a small group of people, and it's easy to talk about because it's something they did and they had a lot of fun, and usually the only thing they talk about is the food and how great the food was, right? Like those are the things that are important to them, but it doesn't matter. Nobody's judging them. They're just learning to stand up and speak in front of everybody. The other thing we do is judging, and I'll explain judging a little bit later, but often when you're judging stuff, you have to give oral reasons. So I've chosen these things for these reasons, and we're just teaching them to be able to present their ideas to someone properly. And then there are actually public speaking competitions. So at a provincial level and a national level, not everybody does it, but you'll have a select few that really want to push for a higher level and actually do some official public speaking. Fun days are really important because kids really just want to have fun, don't they? If we're going to keep them engaged, they want to learn stuff, and that's interesting, but really the highest turnout is always going to be for the fun days. So part of their fundraising, they're going to set money aside and say, and we're going to pay to go skiing, or we're going to pay to go to the water park, or sometimes they're really inexpensive. This place, they went to the lake, they went swimming for an afternoon in the summer, they had a great time. They're just getting together, so kids who join a garden club have a similar interest, don't they? And they get to meet friends who have that similar interest. But when you're growing your garden at home, you're not getting together with those kids to garden. You're just at home gardening. So these fun days allow them to get together and hang out together with kids who have those similar interests as them. And then judging is a key part. So what judging is you learn to rate things. So in this case, we're judging jam. A good quality jam or a less good quality jam, and we'll learn to place them first, second, third, fourth. We'll learn to give reasons. I place the first place jam over the second place jam because it has a better consistency and a better flavor and a nicer color. It's a part of critical thinking, right? It's a part of developing your skills on, if I want to make great jam, these are the things that I want to be looking for. If I want to grow fantastic carrots, these are the things that we're looking for. So judging is a really important way to figure out what is better than the other. Learning also that is sometimes subjective. What you like for jam may not be the same as what I like for jam. And you learn that as part of the judging process. But we've judged apples, we've judged eggs, and then part of judging can be ID. So we've ID'd seed. What are all the different seeds in that cover crop mix? Let's ID breeds of chickens. Let's ID manure, right? They had like 10 different animal manures and they had to ID them. All kinds of things, but it just teaches them to be critical, to pay attention, and it's just an interesting process. And then networking is a really huge part because Quebec 4-H is across the province. So they have a winter camp coming up for 9 to 12-year-olds where they just do a lot of fun winter. They go skiing and sledding, but they just get to meet kids from across the province. You can go to a national program and really meet kids as they get older, like 16 to 21-year-olds start to go to Ottawa and get tours of Parliament. They get to go to BC and learn leadership skills with other people who are from rural areas who have interests in similar type activities. And then there's tours. So we have an ag tour coming up. They're going to visit 10 different farms over 2 days and just get to see how different people are farming differently throughout a certain area throughout Quebec. The key is then they make friends from across the province who have similar interests, and those are people, I guarantee you, we're testament, those are people you stay friends with for life, right? When you find those people that have those similar interests, they become those friends that they keep throughout their lives. So I think that's it.
Do they have a 4-H club everywhere, like Eastern Townships?
So within Quebec, we have a French association and an English association. So we're part of the English association. Within like Ormstown, Howick, Huntington, the Chateauguay Valley, there are clubs. There are clubs out in the Eastern Townships. And then up like Gatineau, Ottawa region, they have some as well. The French clubs tend to be more east as you head out towards Quebec City and that area. There's more French clubs. You could go to Quebec 4-H to see where there's clubs. We're hoping possibly to start a 4-H club here if there was enough interest, and we're happy to help get that going and get it started. But if not, we're in Ormstown, which...
I'm in Sutton, Quebec, and I have 2 young boys.
You're in where?
Sutton, Quebec.
Sutton? Yeah, Brome's not active right now. I don't know how far it is to Howick. It's almost... No, Howick. From Sutton, it would be Hatley, like Lennoxville area, or there used to be a Brum club though. Not right now. Sometimes it goes through phases of like parents who were in it, and then when their kids are that age, and then there's nobody, and it can go up and down.
If there are no passionate parents or kids to keep it alive, it fizzles out. There are amazing opportunities, but it involves
some organizing.
Passion.
Is there a national organization?
Yes, there is a national organization. So there is 4-H and
Your club, like you do manuals and instructions.
yeah, so the provincial association will have some manuals that are sort of more relevant to how 4-H works here in Quebec. And then they do have like support and information on a national level, and they run programming. So there's conferences and different opportunities. Even for adults who are involved in helping them, there's an adult leaders conference where you can go and learn how to be a great leader with young people.
Manitoba has a really stronger First Nations presence in 4-H.
In 4-H, they do a lot of different programming. And we have access to all of that.
And whenever you're doing your elections and stuff and having your board meetings, don't be afraid to tailor it for your First Nations needs. Instead of calling it a president, you can call it a chief or whatever you guys want. And however you do your elections, you tailor it to how you want it done.
We're teaching them to be future citizens, right? So whatever makes sense, and all of our clubs run slightly differently based on the interests that they have and the support that we're offering, how I'm used to running a meeting. Well, that's how I'm going to teach them how to run a meeting. But I mean, imagine all of us, the first time that as adults we joined any kind of board or association, if we learned as kids how to do that, how much better off we would have been.
It's something that could be a real eye-opener for parents watching their children. Unbelievable. I didn't know they had these skills. I didn't know they were capable.
Or ideas. They come up with ideas and you just go, it's a great idea.
So I guess we're coming to that time of the day. And let's give a big hand here for Phil and Stephanie Quinn. Louder! Excellent. And so before we get ready to sing the farewell song, this is the traditional farewell song that we learned when we were younger. Those of you who know it can sing along with us. It kind of goes like this. Now it's time to say goodbye to all our family. All right. One time we did this big show at the Olympics there in Lake Placid, my dance troupe. So I got up, I said, this is the traditional farewell song that we learned when I was a kid. So I started singing MIC. The entire audience, about 2,000 people, started singing along. This is awesome. So, and that's because in our age group, we're referred to as the Puff the Magic Dragon generation. That's the song we used to sing when we were kids. So anyway, so we'd like to thank you all for participating here today. And tomorrow morning we have 3 more presenters. And then right after lunch we're going to have a seat sale. There'll be 3 companies here tomorrow set up. And so we wish you a good evening. And we're not closing, it's just we're coming to just stop for the day. All right, so we'll see you later. On that.